This is ILM Circle, a learning workshop presented by the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona, or ISBA. ILM stands for Intentional Learning for Mutual Respect, the foundation of what ISBA is all about.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome. Peace to everybody who's attending. Thank you so much for coming to this presentation by the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona. I am Uzma Jaffrey, and I am one of the certified speakers with the Speakers Bureau. And in case you don't know, I'm not muted, good. In case you don't know, the Islamic Speakers Bureau is invited out by both public and private schools, Rotary clubs, churches, organizations, college campuses, in order to come and be the horse's mouth and talk about Islam from the Muslim point of view, like a real life Muslim. That is super popular. And the second most popular event that we have is the interfaith panel, where you can talk to a Christian, a Jew, and a Muslim all at once. And it sounds like the beginning of a bar joke, but it's actually really educational. And, you know, it always hits home that there are many, many different ways to God, and we all worship the same one. So to that end, we have a huge repertoire of wonderful speakers and allies in the community, not the least of which are coming from within our own communities. And in the Muslim community in particular, we are graced in Phoenix with Dr. Fawzia Mai Tung, who is a Chinese Muslim who grew up overseas, graduated in medicine out of Jordan, and after practicing there and in Saudi Arabia, she became an educator, which I always say, if you do anything right, you always come back to education. So she is a certified teacher in Arizona who has worked not only as a teacher, but also as a principal. And that served her well as a homeschooling mother to excellent children here in the Valley who are contributing members of the community, some of whom you may have met through the work of the Speakers Bureau. She is also a private school founder and has been a freelance writer for many, many years. And she is a published children's author, The Wonderful Tale of Donkey Skin. And her current interests include Chinese Muslims, as well as independent research about innovative education. She is here to talk to us about Muslims in China, or Islam in China. And we are super excited to have her join us. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Dr. Fawzia Mai Tung.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Good evening, everyone. And so the topic of Islam in China is actually very wide and very deep. And therefore, I've divided it into two parts. Part one, which we are going to see today. And part two, which we are going to see next week. So I'm going to now share my screen, hoping that it's okay. And I hope you can all see the full screen, right? Okay. So today we're going to talk about more general things, number of Muslims in China. It may sound boring, but it's actually very interesting. Chinese term for Islam, the brief history of Islam in China, which might take a bit too long, so I will be hurrying through the last slides to keep within the time frame. And if you have more questions about that, we can always come back to it. Next month, we are going to talk about specific things, specific spotlights on Muslims or Islam in China, including the women-led mosques, the special type of Arabic calligraphy that we have developed, and about the special Muslim Chinese language that was developed. All right, so here we go. How many Muslims are there in China? You might think, well, big deal. Go to Wikipedia, you'll find out. Let's go to Wikipedia. According to them, China has between 6.2 million and 50 million. Isn't that strange? It's a big, big difference between those two numbers. So what's the big deal? Why is it so different? So let's go to the World Fact Book according to the CIA. According to them, by July 2020, the population of China was 1.4 billion, and Muslims were 1.8% of that population. Multiply those two numbers, you get 25.2 million. So most people say, oh, there are about 25 million Muslims in China. According to this, which was studies carried out between 2010 and 2012 by the Beijing University, they calculate that the Muslims made up about 0.4%. 0.4%. And if you multiply that by the 1.4 billion, you get only 6 million. So now you know why they were saying 5 million to 50 million or something like that. But if you look at this description here, they did not include Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan. That's not important, but what's important here is Xinjiang, Tibet, Qinghai, Inner Mongolia, Ningxia, which happen to be provinces where the largest concentrations of Muslims are. So no wonder they have such a very low number. So they tried to make it up by doing this. So from 2006 to 8, 10, 11, they took the numbers of people they interviewed, the families interviewed, and took an average, and they came up with 1.7%. And again, you multiply that, you get 23 million. So you're going to say, all right, so therefore the population should be between 23 to 25 million, right? Well, no, not right. Because there's a little problem here. These are all numbers that came from the communist census, the communist census from communist China. Before the communists came along, the last census done was in 1910. Between 1910 and 1913, took quite a number of years. They didn't have computers in days, so it took a long time. And they came up with, and they did ask, what is your religion? Not just what is your ethnic background, right? And they came up with 40 million Muslims. So if 100 years ago there were 40 million, why are we now 25 million, which is the upper number? Where did the 15 million go? Did they kill them all? And that's not assuming, we are not assuming that that 40 million increased at all, right? The same number, we take the same number, there's 15 million missing. So it doesn't make sense. So what I did was this, look at the population of China back in 1910, it was 439 million. You take that number, you take this number 40 million, and you find out that we used to be 9.1% of the population, not 1.8 or 1.7 or 1.6%. Okay, 9.1%, which is nearly 10 times more. All right, so if we take that and you calculate it, what do you get? The conservative estimate is 126.5 million. I'm not kidding you. Okay, so many people say, well, but you know, yes, I know. First of all, communist China suppressed religion, and therefore, over these last 40 to 50 years or 60 years, it is very possible that many people left the religion. But tell you the truth, the same in every country, okay? Okay, we have many people calling themselves Muslims in, let's say, a so-called Muslim country, but how much do they really practice, right? So you cannot say they are or aren't Muslim based on how much they practice the religion. That's number one. So I said, I would look at one marker, not eating pork, because in China, the biggest difference between Muslim and non-Muslim is not eating pork, okay? The second thing you have to consider is that minorities, ethnic minorities, especially in the countryside, including Muslim, all Muslim minorities, were allowed up to 2 children at the time when there was a one-child policy. So think about it. They multiplied faster than the Khans, okay? Actually, my son-in-law, for example, is the 3rd child in the family. And in the very, very rural areas, you can see 5 children even in some households, because nobody controls them over there. There's not enough control, okay? So, and my son-in-law tells me, I said, how did your mom get you, He said, oh, well, we could have 2 children. So when she got pregnant with him, she went to her mom's house when nobody knew her. Nobody knew it was a 3rd one. And until the baby was born and breastfed and all that, then she came back with the 3rd child. Nobody could say, kill your child, right? So that's how he was born. So what I'm saying here is a lot of Muslims had more than 1 child. In other words, they multiplied faster than the rest of the non-Muslim majorities. Therefore, given that, okay, there was a decrease in practice and all that, but there was a faster increase. So therefore, it should be more than this number. That's why I'm saying it is a conservative estimate. And personally, I think it's correct because when I was in Nanjing and others like Zhengzhou and whatever, I cannot, and even Beijing, I cannot walk 2 blocks without seeing an Islamic restaurant. Practically every 10 restaurants, there would be an Islamic one. So I'm saying 10%, right? Now that we established this number, that would make China the 5th largest Islam country by population in the world. And I just updated these today because my last presentation on this was from 2010 or something. So these are the latest numbers. It still is the 5th largest if we go by 126.5 million. Now, this tells you how important it is to know more about Muslims in China because we are a very large number. And if Chinese Muslims are allowed to practice properly, we can become a very important force in the Muslim world. All right, so next topic. What do you call Islam in Chinese? In any other language, in English, in French, in Arabic, you say, what's the religion called? And it'll tell you Islam. So in Chinese, it has more than one name, actually. The first one is called Islam, which, as you can tell, is a transliteration of the word Islam. But then the second most, but if you talk to any Chinese, they have no idea what you're talking about. So the most popular name is this one, Huijiao, which means the religion of the Hui being a Muslim minority, okay? But if you ask the Muslims themselves what you call your religion, most of them will tell you Qingzhen Jiao. What does Qingzhen Jiao mean? It means the religion of the pure and true. That's interesting, isn't it? Actually, not only we say our religion is called the religion or the teachings of the pure and true, our mosque is called the temple of the pure and true. Our restaurants are called the eating house of the pure and true. The halal stamp they put on all the food is to say halal, they say Qingzhen, the pure and true food. So everything we do is pure and true. So when I was a kid, I remember asking my dad, because I grew up, of course, not in China. I grew up all over the world, in the Arab world. I'd say, why do we keep saying pure and true for everything? And my dad thought for a long time. He didn't have the answer, obviously. And he said, because Muslims are pure and they are true. I think, okay, that's a nice answer, but why don't the Arabs or any other nationality call themselves pure and true then, right? Why do only the Chinese Muslims call themselves pure and true? Now, I finally got the answer a number of years ago through a dear friend of mine, Randa Hamwi, and she was telling me about this book here, okay, which is a lexicon or dictionary that was compiled by Ahmad ibn Faris al-Qaswini in the 10th century, which is about 400 years after the time of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's called the Mu'jam Maqais al-Lugha. And if you look up the word Islam in this dictionary, it meant purely true in Chinese, Qingzhen. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? I mean, to me, it was like, wow. So my question now is the Islam practiced in China one of the purest preserved forms of Islam? Is it? Since the name, at least we are the only country in the world that preserved the real meaning of the word Islam. Everybody else calls it voluntary surrender to the will of Allah in peace. It's all very nice, really, it's very nice because Islam sounds like salam, sounds like aslama, so that's why they get this very long definition. But it didn't mean that at all. It meant pure and true. So let's look a little bit at the history of Islam in China. The earliest Muslims who arrived in China actually came from the sea. And I need to show you a little bit the timeline of Chinese history so you understand when I'm talking about different dynasties, understand what I'm talking about. So we know that Islam came around this time here, 500, 600 CE. This time here was called the Tang Dynasty, which is one of the most glorious times of Chinese civilization, where it expanded everywhere. The Silk Road came, and so on and so forth. And then the next so-called glorious age of China was during the Ming Dynasty. Okay, and we're going to talk a lot about this one. The final one was the one here, the Qing Dynasty, and it ended in 1911 with the revolution by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, and we became a republic thereafter. So I'm going to talk first about this time here, still in the 600s. Okay, the first Muslim on record who arrived in China was Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, who was the maternal uncle of the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is said that the story goes that he was one of the Sahaba that went to Abyssinia, if you remember, during the first migration, right? And since he was a merchant, then he got there, and some people say he boarded the ship from Yemen, some say from wherever, it doesn't matter. But anyway, so he boarded a trading ship and went to South China, to Guangzhou, which is also called Canton in English. And that was the only port allowed where foreigners were allowed to trade within a certain enclave or compound, right? So any Chinese trader wanted to trade would come into the compound. So that's where he went, and his grave today is there. And you can see here, this is supposed to be his grave. And this is where he is buried. Of course, it was rebuilt several times over the years. Now, he reached China and during the lifetime of the Prophet himself. And this mosque was built in 627 AD. If you remember, the Prophet lived from 570 to 632, I mean ECE, not AD, of course. And Al-Quba Mosque was built in 622, 5 years before this one. And I don't think it's a large stretch of my imagination to say that this probably was the second mosque in the world after Al-Quba in Medina. And now I'm trying to tell you how early Islam went to China and how many Chinese there are today who are Muslim. And therefore, we all need to learn more about Chinese Muslims because we might actually become a very important force. The next entry into China was through the Silk Road, obviously. And as you know, the Silk Road was starting in Italy and going all the way through the Middle East, going through Central Asia, Uzbekistan. I actually went to Uzbekistan, to Tashkent and to Samarkand, and I actually saw the caravanserai that they used to use. It's very, very interesting. Anyway, and all the way to China, ending up in Xi'an, which is where the terracotta warriors are. Now, I'm just going to add a little thing here because it's very interesting for me. So when I was living in Jordan, at the time in the 70s, the main roads were paved, but the small alleys and lanes were not paved. My brother used to play in the lanes with the neighborhood boys, and they used to play marbles. And one day, one of these boys ran to me and said, second sister, second sister. They all call me after my brother, right? So, Erjie. And he showed me a coin, said, is this a Chinese coin? Abed says it's a Chinese coin. So I looked at it, and it was all copper in color, very old looking. It had a square hole in the middle, and it said Qianlong Tongbi on either side, on the four sides. Qianlong is the third emperor of the Qing dynasty. This told me some Arab merchant had traveled all the way to China and brought this coin back with him and dropped it there in the sand and waited for centuries until some little boys were playing marble and discovered it again. So I told him with a very straight face, because I used to make half a dinar for an evening of babysitting. I said, I'll give you half a dinar for it. So he was thinking, wow, you're paying that much? So I said, nah, I'm going to keep it. Now I regret not paying 2 dinars or 3 or 5 dinars for it. Because I think that was so unique, you know. I met him again like a few years ago because my brother kept in touch with him. And I said, by the way, do you still have that Chinese coin? And he said, what Chinese coin? Well, I told him, he says, oh, yeah. Maybe it's in the old house. I'm thinking, oh, I wish I had paid you 10 dinars for it. Anyway, so that's that. All right, let's move on. So in the Tang Dynasty, there were a lot of Muslims coming, and they were mostly traders on their caravans and so on. And some settled permanently in those special enclaves for foreigners, okay? And they started building their mosques there and so on and so forth. By 757, the Tang emperors well, I don't know if you know about the Tang Dynasty, but there was this beautiful woman called Yang Guifei, and it's a big story about emperor being so engrossed with her that he totally forgot to rule his country properly. And this guy called An Lushan had a rebellion. 5 million people died in the civil war. Emperor had to run away from his capital. Eventually, these Muslim soldiers came and helped him regain the whole country. So in order to reward these Muslim soldiers, he gave them lands all in the western side of China because they have big deserts. It's okay, give you some land there, right? So more and more Muslims settled over there. By 800, again, they were allowed to settle in Yunnan. So I have here a map so you can tell where it is. Yunnan, I don't know if you can see my little mouse thing, okay? So Yunnan is here, southwest China. Here, Qinghai, Gansu, Inner Mongolia, and Ningxia. These are the places that have the most large concentration of Chinese Muslims. Xinjiang is, of course, the one that's all in the news nowadays, is the huge, well, desert and other stuff on the very western edge of China, and is our main border province with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, and here Afghanistan a little bit. Okay, so we will mention later on Yunnan a lot, and Xi'an, as you know, here it is. Xi'an, which was capital of China for a long time as well, the terracotta warriors. All right, so the Muslim settlers then were allowed because, I mean, when they come as traders, don't bring their wives with them. So once they decide to settle down, they were allowed to marry Chinese women. But if they ever wanted to go back to their lands, the Chinese women were not allowed to go with them. And if a Muslim father had a child, he would be raised as a Muslim. So by and by, all these Muslims started having this big new community of Chinese Muslims or mixed Chinese Muslim, and these were called the Hui. And basically, my father tells me that my ancestor was one of these Arabs who came to China, he and his brother, to bring gifts from the Khalifa, whoever it was at the time, of 100 Arabian horses for the Tang Emperor. So it takes them 2 years to get there. They go there, settle down, sit down for another 2 years. They decide to go back, and everybody say, hey, I like you guys. Why don't you stay, take up Chinese names, marry Chinese princesses, and then I'll give you official post in the government. So they stayed on. So the one who started with Ma, probably Mahmud, he took the name Ma. Like my mom-in-law was called Ma Lin, right? So she was from the Ma family. And actually today they say out of every 10 Ma, 9 of them are Muslims, okay? And then Mai, my family name, was probably somebody called Malik or Mazin or anything that starts with Mai, right? So we're not sure who he was, but that's what my father tells me, 2 Arab brothers. We then skip now all the way to the Ming emperors in 14 to 1600, okay? So the Ming dynasty, like we said, is the second. So the Tang and the Ming are supposed to be the 2 most glorious episodes in Chinese history. But very few Chinese know that the Ming emperors were all Muslims. However, all the Chinese Muslims knew that. It just was never written until this guy called Ma Mingdao, who happens to be a good friend of my dad. And he was actually the military attaché in Turkey when my father was there in the embassy. So I used to play with his kids and so on. So after he retired, he decided to put it as a book because we all know that, but it's never written down as a research anywhere. So he actually published this book using a lot of evidence to support his, not his thesis, I mean the thesis of the book, but what all the Muslims knew anyway, that he was a Muslim. His wife was the daughter of a well-known Muslim general. Everybody knew that that was a Muslim. And back in the days, no Muslim woman could marry a non-Muslim man. So there was no way he was not a Muslim. Whether he was born one or converted to one, I don't know, but he was a Muslim. 10 of his closest generals were all Muslims. And later on, many of his advisors were Muslims, okay? And this is what Sister Azra showed me. Do you know this? And of course, I know this. Actually, here it is, right here. This plaque was made by the mosque, the Central Mosque in Taipei. And all of us have one of these that we can show people. It is called a 100-word praise. So I fixed it a little bit, the translation, because I saw different translations all over the internet. And many of them, I think, are translated by people who don't know Islam very well. So they translate very strangely. And as you know, in classical Chinese, there's no punctuation mark. And any character could be a noun, a verb, or an adjective. So that's why you get some translations that were very different from others, right? So pretty much what it says is, since the creation of the universe, God had already appointed the great preacher of faith, born in the West. He received the Holy Scripture made of 30 parts, and we all know we have 30 juzuk, right? To guide all creations, master of all rulers, leader of the holy ones, assisting heaven to protect the people, praying 5 times daily, silently hoping for peace, heart purely focused on the true Lord. So the word true Lord, Zhenju, is what we call Allah. So somebody translated it as Allah, but I said it didn't say Allah, it said Zhenju, so I translate it as true Lord. Giving to the poor, saving from calamity, in a cave retreat, experience the unseen, wrenching and elevating souls away from wrongdoings, mercy across the world, the path crowning, the path being the straight path, crowning the times across, I translate as the times that it said, ancient times and modern times, so across the whole history, right? Vanquished evil, reverted to unity, teachings named pure and true, meaning Islam. Muhammad, it's spelled out Muhammad, Muhammad, the noble high one. Now, don't tell me he was not a Muslim, okay? Anybody writing this could not have been not a Muslim, right? So this poem he wrote down, and after he wrote it down, it was engraved on this stone stele, which is very out of focus here, but you can tell it was engraved there, and put in a mosque. The first year that he became emperor, he built a mosque in Nanjing, which was his capital, and put this thing there. And still, don't tell me he's not a Muslim, okay? So a lot of historians say, he just supported Muslims. He loved the Muslims. I say, sure. Okay, let's look at the rest. Why is it pretty sure? So this is the modern one. It was rebuilt and re-put on 2 different mosques here. And it's put in many, many mosques across China, because we all know this, right? This is Jingjue Si, which is the mosque of the royal, of the quiet awakening. Okay, the first mosque that he built in Nanjing, the capital of China at that time. And my eldest daughter actually lives there right now. So when I went to visit her, the last time was 2 years ago, we go to pray Jumu'ah in this mosque here, okay? And it is still standing till today. It burned out at one point, was rebuilt by Zheng He. As you know, he was a Muslim navigator, the famous world navigator. So I'm going to name only a few things about things that he did. So the first thing he did when he became emperor, he built mosques. And in Nanjing alone, he built several ones. Up to a number of years ago, there were 13 mosques in Nanjing alone. And now there are only 2 functioning, because as you know, there's a new policy of suppression and all that. They closed down and destroyed others and so on. The second edict he did was, slaughterhouses can only be manned by Muslims. And guess why? The whole country is halal. That was a stroke of genius, right? And don't tell me he's not a Muslim, okay? He also, because the Chinese have a very elaborate burials, they have 49 days of mourning and blah, 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 all these things, burning of incense, burning of paper money and all these other things. But he said, mourning no more than 3 days. Burials have to be really simple in very plain colors and so on. His companions were not allowed to drink alcohol. One of the generals famously drank alcohol at one point, and he had him executed, though he was a Muslim. Because he was a Muslim, maybe. On the spot, said, you just drank and you came drunk, executed. From the 1st to the 16th Ming Emperor, they never exceeded 4 wives. Interestingly, isn't it? And you know that emperors can have between 84 to 4,000 wives and concubines in the palace. They never exceeded 4. And different travelers, I have different things I can show you on a completely separate thing if you want, but travelers who traveled from the Middle East to China in those days describe daily prayers in the palace taking place, led by the emperor himself. Anyway, so however, historians often said, no, he oppressed the Muslims because he forbade Hui, not just Hui, but also the Kazakh, the Salar, and so on, to marry other Muslims. They had to marry a Khan, a non-Muslim. But you know very well in our religion, if you want to marry somebody non-Muslim, what do? that other person has to convert. Thus, at the beginning of the Ming Dynasty, there were only 5 million Hui. By the end of it, I couldn't find any number anywhere. I'm going to keep on looking, but I didn't have a number. But we do know, as you will see later on, that in the province of Gansu alone, there were already 5 million. And that's not counting all the other, the Uyghurs, the Kazakhs, the whatever, and all the other provinces. So I have only one number for one province, and that was already 5 million. So they multiplied over the 200 years that the Ming Dynasty was there. And I'm trying to say that when he forbade intermarriage, he did it with the purpose in mind, that he is going to multiply the number of Muslims, okay? And also, what he was doing is that he was trying to show that the Muslims were not a different race, they were Chinese. Because before this dynasty, I mean, there was the Yuan. The Yuan, as you know, were Mongols, Genghis Khan and his grandsons, Kublai Khan and so on, right? And the Chinese resented them, though they became emperor and all that. They resented them because they felt you are not a Khan, you are not a real Chinese, you are a minority, okay? You are a Mongol. So he didn't want that to repeat itself. And therefore, all the Muslims intermarried so much that they couldn't tell if their children were or were not non-Chinese, you know, if they were from a minority ethnic race. So the Hui became very, very spread among the general population. I'm going to talk a little bit about Zhenghe. As you know, the kids in 6th grade nowadays take a chapter about navigation around the world, explorers, and very nicely they include Zhenghe, which is nice, but very few of them know that he was a Muslim. He was a Muslim from Yunnan, that southwest province I was showing you. And he was a eunuch. As you know, eunuch, somebody whose balls were cut, because if you want to work in the palace, it has to happen. There's no other way you can work in the palace. His life is quite interesting, but at one point, he was given the job of being an admiral. He was given a huge fleet, and every single ship was about, some were 4 times, one were 10 times larger than the ships of Christopher Columbus. And this happened 40 years before Christopher Columbus. He navigated all over the world, and even in the book 1462, 14 something, by this British writer, he claimed that he even went to America. That is a whole topic altogether. But he, at least we know that he went to several places, including Mecca, some say. So I am assuming that he probably told the emperor, I want to go to Mecca for the Hajj. The emperor says, you want to go? Wait, I'm going to give you a mission. Take a fleet and do this and that, and then you can go to Mecca as well, you know. So he went through the whole of Southeast Asia. One thing he did on one of his voyages is that he brought this Chinese princess as a bride to the Sultan of Malacca, which is a part of Malaysia, right? And since she was a Muslim, and when she married the Sultan had to convert, so he became Muslim. Since both of them, the king and the queen, were Muslims, so the whole population of Malacca converted as well. And that is how Malaysia started becoming Muslim. Not from Arab traders coming from the Arab world, because of Zhenghe, a Chinese Muslim who came from China. And you can see now Zhenghe's influence all over Southeast Asia. Here is the Sanpao. Sanpao means his nickname was the eunuch of the 3 treasures. So this is a Sanpao Gong, Lord of the 3 treasures temple in Malacca. Here is in Banda Aceh, which is in Indonesia, Surabaya in Indonesia. And this is the famous ancient Chinese map showing the Americas on it, but dated 1418, way before Columbus. Anyway, let's move on now to the next part of the Chinese history. The last dynasty was called the Qing dynasty. So in 1644, the Ming dynasty fell, and the Qing were Manchurians. They came from Northeast China, and they were also a minority ethnic group. So the Muslims were part of the loyalists. So that was nothing to do with Islam or with religion. They were just leading this rebellion to get rid of the Qing. And they brought in the Han, they brought in the Kazakhs, they brought in whatever, and they tried, but eventually they were defeated. The next 2 rebellions are very interesting because they became independent nations. And this one, the Pantai, was recognized by at least one country, I believe it's Russia or something. So in 1855, this guy from Yunnan called Tu Wenxiu and his Arabic, so all Muslims have an Arabic name, like my name is Fawzia, but my Chinese name is Mai Daiqi, right? So we have two names, the Arabic name and the Chinese name. He was called Suleiman Abdul Rahman and called himself Sultan after he rebelled against the Qing dynasty and founded a country which he called Pingnanguo in Yunnan. The capital was at Dali. And the first 8 years, they were extremely successful. Everybody wore Chinese clothing, but they mandated the use of Arabic in that country. They banned pork, but eventually the Qing government recovered, sent a good, clever general, and over 1 million of them were killed. He was assassinated, and that was the end of them. Around the same time, there was another rebellion in northwest China by Muslims also. It all started with a quarrel about the price of bamboo sticks, but it's a small spark that there was already a lot of problems undercurrents of problems, and therefore it's a small spark that leads to everything exploding. So in Shanxi, Gansu, Ningxia, and Xinjiang, where most of the Uyghurs are today, there was Ningxia is also a heavily Muslim area. A series of rebellions happened, and eventually by 1864 it was led by a guy called Yaqub Beg. And they actually established a country also, an independent country that lasted till 1877. Eventually, the Qing dynasty, you see at that time, around that time, there was another rebellion going on the east side, and they were busy putting that one down. That's why they allowed these two to foment themselves and let them be for a while. It was called the Taiping Rebellion, led by somebody who called himself Jesus' brother. So there had been a lot of missionary work in China, so they knew about Jesus. So he said he was the brother of Jesus, and he was here to blah, blah, blah. And anybody who joined him, he was impervious to bullets. And so people who shot them, the bullets wouldn't go through them, you know. So they led the rebellion, and they even actually went to Beijing, went to the capital and so on. So the Qing dynasty was very busy with that one. After that was put down, they turned their side, okay, new Muslims now, I'm going to take care of you, came back and killed 20 million of them. And that's where I got the number of 5 million from Gansu. So this province, Gansu, had 5 million Muslims at the beginning of the Qing dynasty. By the time they were done with the killing, there were about 75,000 left. Most of them died. And actually, they heard hearsay that they meant to do a genocide and come back and kill everybody. So the Donggan gathered their population and tried to immigrate to Russia. There were 3 waves, and later on more waves. So a lot of went to what is some to all the way to Crimea, but some to Kyrgyzstan, many of them to Kyrgyzstan, and some to Kazakhstan, where nowadays you find pockets of these Chinese Muslims that moved there and are called the Donggans. Then we move now to the Republic era. So Sun Yat-sen led the revolution in 1911, and we became a republic called Republic of China. Not the present one, which is the People's Republic of China, right? So that was a Republic of China. And Sun Yat-sen proclaimed that the 5 main ethnic groups were the Han, Man, meaning Manchu, Hui, Muslim, Hmong, Mongol, and Zhang, Tibetans, okay? So he said that we are all equal. And that was wonderful because he knew that Muslims were great warriors, right? So a lot of them became joined the army and fought for the Republic, okay? There were I can talk a lot about what happened between China and Middle East, especially during World War II. My mother-in-law's father was part of a delegation that went on the tour of the Middle East, telling all the other countries to recognize our struggle against the Japanese occupation, so on, okay. By 1939, at least 33 Hui Muslims went to Cairo's Azhar University to study. One of them actually, I became later on the Imam of the Grand Mosque in Taipei. His youngest daughter, who was my classmate, my schoolmate, is now in Los Angeles, actually. By 1912, the Chinese Muslim Federations were formed in Nanjing, which became the capital again. And there were lots of Chinese Muslim associations established, up to 30 journals between 1911 and 1937. And a lot of Muslims served with a government, including Bai Chongqi, who was a general and became defense minister. Okay. the Muslims got a right, a very specific right, that we are allowed not to bow. My father was a diplomat, and every year on New Year's Day, we're supposed to have a little ceremony in the embassy, and everybody bows to the picture of Chiang Kai-shek and Sun Yat-sen. And my father doesn't bow. He gets not to bow. He just does like with his head. That's all. And he told us, we do not bow. We're Muslims, don't bow to a picture. Okay. And so all the Chinese Muslims had these special rights, and they were, that's why a lot of them started working with the government, because they were allowed not to bow. Now, in 1949, the communists took over China, and that was the People's Republic of China. Am I running out of time? I'm doing okay, okay. If I am, just let me know, okay? During the Cultural Revolution, the Red Guards persecuted all religions, Islam like all others. Mosques were attacked, some were destroyed. They smashed the so-called 4 O's, and a lot of imams were taken prisoner or tortured or forced to eat pork, and so on and so forth. In Taiwan, however, things were a bit different. It's a long story. So anyway, this is the Grand Mosque of Taipei. And I remember my father, it was built in 1957, the year I was born. And my father was on the board of the advisory board for this mosque. Today, I think there are about 13 mosques in all of Taiwan in different cities. But unfortunately, it's a tragedy, but there are less and less actual Chinese Muslims in Taiwan now. The population was only about 40,000 Muslims in Taiwan about 30 or 40 years ago. But today, it's 240,000. Unfortunately, most of them are not Chinese. We have now a lot of Indonesian maids who came, a lot of laborers, and then a lot of traders from everywhere, Southeast Asia, Africa, Middle East, and so on and so forth. And these are most of the Muslims now in Taiwan, unfortunately. The children have been lured away by the fact that we are. You see, I often think that our country is supposed to give equal opportunities to all religions, but because of that, the religion got lost. Anyway, that's another story. We can talk about it. We have a Muslim cemetery. Oh, 7 mosques. I thought there were 13. Imam Dawood thing, this is what I was talking about. And we have several associations, Muslim student groups. And now, interestingly, so who are the Muslims in China? Interestingly enough, in the 17th, 18th centuries, there was a lot of Sufis of different orders. And if we have time, I could show you some YouTube videos of Muslims doing the Sufi thing, you know, different from what I've seen here. Maybe it's just specific to Chinese Sufis, I don't know. And also, by the end of the 19th century, this Imam Ma Wanfu went to Mecca, studied there, and came back, and he was highly influenced by the Wahhabi movement. So he told everybody to give up Sufism, to give up grave worship and the worship of saints and so on and so forth, and go back to the tradition of the Sunnah. Later on in 1936, this guy Mataba went to Hajj, and later on he and a few others, they were influenced by the Salafi movement. And when he came back, they said, no, you shouldn't do this, you do that. And even the previous people, you know, fought them. So there was a lot of problems going on. What they call the old religion, the new religion, and so on and so forth. Do we have Shias? Yes, we do have some Shias. They are the minority, but there are some. Now, because of certain different reasons, the first reason being like the Donggan going all into Central Asia, but also after the communist takeover in 1949, all those Muslims who worked in the military or in the government had to flee China. This guy called Ma Bufang, he was the supreme commander of Qinghai and Gansu, which were all Muslim, and he was Muslim himself, right? So this guy, he actually took an airplane, filled it with all his closest generals and his family and extended family, and they flew over the Himalayas. And the reason I know these details of the story of his stories because his wife number 3 and 4, and some people say that the other one was also his wife, whatever. They were my landladies when I was in Jeddah. Okay, so I heard all the story firsthand from them. Okay, so apparently when they were trying to cross the Himalayas, the airplane was so heavy that they couldn't make it. So they had to throw overboard all their gold ingots. So I often told my husband, one of these days when you have no money, let's go and hike the Himalayas and look for those gold ingots. So they had to throw gold overboard until they cleared the Himalayas and went to India. And once in India, they said, well, my God, we can't stay here. It's overpopulated, it's too hot, whatever. So they decided to go to Saudi Arabia. Say, oh my God, this is even more underdeveloped than our own place. So they went to Cairo. So they stayed happy in Cairo, started buying, properties, started putting their money in the bank. And then what happened? They turned socialist. So they said, oh my God, we just escaped communism and fell into socialism. So then they moved to Saudi Arabia. By the time they were not able to take whatever they had already bought, like houses and so on, but they were able to take whatever they still had, a lot of cash and liquid cash, went to Saudi Arabia and found Jeddah too hot. So they went to Taif. So by the time we first went to Saudi Arabia in 1964, a lot of them, there were a few hundreds of them up in Taif and a few in Jeddah, and Mecca. By now, there are quite a few thousand, okay? And in Saudi Arabia, they're called Bukharis because, they think we are Central Asian. We all look Central Asian, so they call us Bukharis from Bukhara, but we're not, obviously. We are from China. Anyway, and some of them, they took up the last name Asrini, meaning the Chinese. So my friend, for example, she's Shadia Abdullah Asrini, All right, so other large concentrations in the world, Dubai, by now, there's an estimated 125,000 in there, and more around the Gulf area. In Central Asia, like I said, about 10.5 million, the descendants from the Donga migrations because of Qing oppression. In Malaysia, about 80,000, and Myanmar and Thailand was 30,000. In Malaysia, the reason why Malaysia has so many compared to Indonesia, for example, is because of the work of this man, Haj Ibrahim Mai Tung, who was my mother-in-law's father. If you go to Malaysia, you mention his name, all the Malaysians all remember him. He worked with Tunku Abdul Rahman, who was one of the founders of Malaysia as a country, and became the first prime minister of Malaysia. So he worked in close relationship with him, and they founded an organization called PERKIM, whose job was really da'wah in Malaysia. I remember when my father was trying to introduce me to my husband for marriage, he told me that, there's a little old man with a little wispy white beard and bright eyes, and he goes and gives a lecture about Islam to 500 people, and when he finishes, everyone goes out and takes a shahada on the way out. This is how powerful and magnetic a personality he was. Anyway, so then let's move on to, right, so by 2010, from China alone, you have 13,500 pilgrims going by per year. In Taiwan, unfortunately, we have only 33. Part of the reason is not that we don't have enough Muslims. That is the reason, one reason. But the other reason is that the government provides free Hajj expenses. And so everybody waits for their turn to get into the delegation. They say, well, why should I pay for myself when I can get it done for free? Right? So, and that's why everybody waits for their turn to get into the delegation, unfortunately. So money breaks religion, right? All right, Q&A.
That was incredible. Thank you so much for that. Sorry, I had some difficulty unmuting myself, but I finally got permission. I think if we can we unshare the screen so that we can see all the audience and you can see them as well. And then we'll entertain any questions. If you're too shy to ask a question, you're welcome to put it in the chat box and I'll read it out loud. I do see a raised hand from Ahmed. Awaisha, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum
First of
salam.
all, I just want to thank you for this interesting and very valuable talk. It's enormously, I have never attended a talk that I benefit from that much for a very long time. So thank you very much for the well-prepared talk. That's the first, just a comment to get it out of the way. So back to my question. So you have given an enormous amount of like information about the history of China, as well as the current status right now of China, of the Chinese people in China. So my question is related to the current status of the Chinese people in China right now. I'd like to know about how do the Chinese people, I'm talking about the Chinese people, not the Chinese government, the non-Muslim Chinese people, how do they look at the Chinese Muslims from two perspectives, whether that's number one, are they aware, is the majority of the Chinese people aware of the existence of this religion in the country? And the second of all, how are you perceived as Muslims in China from the different people that who are not Muslims when you travel to a city that is not Muslim majority city in China? And thank you very much for that.
Yeah, that's why number 9, I was going to say current situation. I thought, okay, I'll wait for people to ask me the question. So two parts of the question. One is how are other non-Muslims viewing the Muslims in general, and how are they viewed if the city is not majority Muslim. So I grew up abroad, and because of the communist policies, was not able to visit China earlier. As you know, China did not open its borders until 1980, and then even so, it could only go through Hong Kong. And I did not get to go to China until the 2010, I think, when my daughter went there to study. And since then, I've been, I think, 4 times already. Sometimes in some cities where there are lots of Muslims, and in some places where there aren't many. Even if you meet a Chinese here, for example, who is not a Muslim, if you tell them, oh, you're from the Hui ethnic minority, they would know. They say from the Hui religion. Some of them know, some of them don't know. So generally speaking, most Chinese non-Muslim do not know much about the religion. They know about the ethnic group, definitely, and they lump it all together. I think it's partially because of the government. The government doesn't allow religion. So, and as I said, they would call our religion the religion of the Hui people, right? They wouldn't call it Islam, right? And some people do know, for example, there was a restaurant, the first Northeastern restaurant to open in the Chandler area. We went there and had food, but I told them, you know what, if you use the halal beef to make these things, I could get you so much more business. She says, oh, is it the one that says halal? Because they buy their food from a restaurant depot. And she said, it's even cheaper than the regular. No problem, I'll buy it. And so at that time, I told many of my friends to go and eat there. But eventually, they changed the management and the new people didn't do that. So anyway, whatever. So when I was telling her, I'm Muslim, and so I was explaining to her, she said, oh, I know who they are. Back home, because in Northeast China, lots of Muslims too. So I said, back home, there are lots of them. They don't eat pork, right? I said, yeah, right. So most of them, they all they know about Muslims is that the ones that don't eat pork. Okay, and so that, like I said, the biggest defining marker for Muslims in China is they don't eat pork. And the reason why most Chinese are not aware of the religion is because for a long time, a very long time, starting from the end of the Ming dynasty. So if you remember, the Mings were Muslims. So after the Qing came instead, many Muslims tried to keep quiet and not let anybody know they were Muslims, because if you identify as Muslim, you'd be identified as a revolutionary who's trying to bring back the Mings, right? And plus the Muslims kept making all these revolutions and rebellions, So they didn't want to be identified as Muslims. So they kept very, very quiet. There was no dawah of any kind. And many of them tried to blend in with general population. Women, especially that not in the Northwest and the Southwest, in the cities would not be wearing hijab and so on and so forth. They tried to mingle with the general population and disappear so people would not notice them. But after 600 years, it became an attitude, an ingrained attitude. So even in the early days of the Republic, many Muslims did not want other people to know they were Muslims. As a child, I remember we never talked about it. When I was in Paris, my father would pray secretly in his room, so we wouldn't know it, he was praying. The first time I saw my father praying was when we traveled to Jerusalem on our way to Saudi Arabia. And he was in Al-Aqsa Mosque and started praying. And I said, Mom, what's he doing? What's he doing? That was the first time I saw my father pray. He would lock himself in his room to pray, and that's probably a habit he acquired back home. So generally, when they hear about persecution of Uyghurs, they only know they persecute them because of their ethnicity, not because of their religion. So Islam as a religion is not that well known actually in China among non-Muslims.
And how do they treat you? That's the second part of the question. How do they treat you?
And they're just like any other Chinese.
So
for me, the problem is they recognize I'm not a native immediately. I don't know what's written across my head or something that I'm not a native. So they try to overcharge me and all that. They can tell I'm not from there. I don't talk the same way, maybe, I don't know. Because when I went to China, my first surprise was people were very rude. Very rude. They don't talk politely. I mean, my father, my mother-in-law, all the people from previous generations who came out of China, they're extremely polite, well-behaved, and so on and so forth. But when I went back and I realized that's what the communists did, whoever was a peasant or was a worker was the top. So everybody pretend to be a worker and a peasant, and they are rude and they talk loudly. And so when I went, I was surprised how loudly they talk. And they shout, I was going there and they told me if they tell you 100 yuan, you tell him 10. I said, 10? I can say 90, but I cannot say, So I told them, okay, can you make it 80? And I felt very shy to bargain. And they were, what? You want me to go bankrupt or something? And I said, okay, here's your 100, because they are so rude and they scream and they shout at you. But apparently after the Olympics, things changed a lot because they wanted to welcome foreigners. And so they had lessons and they would have posters everywhere, say thank you, be polite, blah, 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 lower your voices. And so I think it's starting to change.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for those very complete and thorough answers. There is a question in the audience, Dr. Fawzia. Please explain who the Uyghur are.
So the term Uyghur actually was given by, the term didn't come until quite recently, I think the 19th century or something. And they were actually just part of the Xinjiang Muslims, okay? And as you know, the people in the northwest of China, there are the Hui, which are mostly descendant of mixed marriages of Arabs, Persians, and Chinese over the centuries. But some other groups have kept quite to themselves, like the Kazakhs. The Uyghurs, which originally were another ethnic group, but they were given the name Uyghur by, I forgot, I can look it up for you. And so they're just one ethnic group, which are mostly in Xinjiang, right? In the big desert province we saw on the western side. And that was a question, right? Who are the Uyghurs?
Yeah,
right?
who are the Uyghurs? And I guess, yeah.
They are a particular ethnic group that lives mainly in Xinjiang and are mostly Muslim.
Yeah. And you said earlier that they were being persecuted because of their ethnicity, not because of their religion, because most people don't know that. What is the problem with their ethnicity that they are being persecuted in the way that, we know they are?
Okay, so as you know, that most of the Chinese, since communist China, it's supposed to be a religion, be atheist, in other words. Many Chinese do not understand Islamic religion. So when you say the Hui or you say the Uyghurs, they associate everything you do with your culture, not with your religion. So in Xinjiang, being a very deserted, a desert province, they often feel that the people who are the more religious are the ones who are less educated, more rural, less urban, and so on and so forth. Okay, so they assume that the things you do, like covering your hair, growing a beard, and so on, has to do with believing in superstitions, cultural superstitions. They don't understand, because they don't understand religion, don't understand faith, and all these things. So when they want, the idea is that we want to sinicize you, want you to become more Chinese and less cultural. But why do they do that? It goes back many centuries, starting with the rebellions in the Qing dynasty. So they know that these people in the Northwest, they like to rebel, they like to whatever. We have to prevent stuff like that, okay? And what happened was that, especially after ISIS came up and started infiltrating a lot of people, I don't know if it's true or not, but they say that they had infiltrated the Chinese Uyghurs as well. In 2000, I'm confused now, 12, 13? Anyway, the year that I went to China for my daughter's wedding, me and my mother-in-law and my daughter, so the three of us, we flew in and the whole place was almost empty, and we were trying to cross the immigration. So since it's all empty, my daughter said, okay, each one of us takes a different line so we can go in quickly. And there were just the three of us there. So my mother-in-law got through, my daughter got through, and I got stuck. So the guy asked me, are you Wei? I said, what? Are you Wei Zhu? I said, can you raise your voice? Can't hear you. I said, are you asking me, am I Hui Zhu? Meaning, are you ethnically Hui? And personally, I don't think I am. I don't know where my Hui ancestors went a long time ago, but I feel I'm a Muslim primarily. So I said, I'm a Hui Jiao Tu. I'm a Muslim, but not a Hui ethnic, because my mom is from Taiwan, right? He's looked at me. He doesn't understand what I'm saying. He said, are you Wei Zhu? Are you ethnically Wei? So Uyghur in Chinese is Wei Uer. And so they take the first syllable, Wei Zhu means Wei ethnicity or Wei tribe. You know? And since he wasn't talking loud and my Chinese is not as good as my daughter's, because she lived now in China long enough to speak better Chinese than me. So I thought he said, are you Hui Zhu? I said, no, I'm Hui Jiao Tu. And he kept saying, are you Hui Zhu? And I said, finally, I said, all right, whatever, I am Hui Jiao, I'm Hui Zhu. That was it. Put down everything, called his superior, and they were on and on. And thinking. So my daughter passed, my mother-in-law passed and said, why are you still stuck there? I said, I don't know. He asked me if I'm Hui Zhu, and I said, yeah, and now I'm stuck. He said, Mom, are you stupid? He was asking if you're Wei Zhu, if you're Uyghur. I said, oh, no. So what I didn't know was, while we were flying in the air from America, something happened in Guangzhou. There was a Uyghur who they don't have guns like everybody has in America, so they only have knives. So he went to a subway station or something, took out his knife, started, stabbing people and hacking people right and left. So he was arrested and all that. So he, and every now and then there are some Uyghurs here and there who do some crazy stuff like that. And that's when they started actually doing all this. And later on, of course, it got worse and worse, and they had these concentration camps. The last time I was in China 2 years ago, one of the guys who invited me for dinner, his wife was at that time pregnant. And as we were talking, I found out that his wife had been in a concentration camp. I said, you have been? She said, yeah, I was there for 6 months. I said, why? She said, because I accompanied my husband to Turkey. So her husband, he's very interested in history, and especially in the history of the Muslims. That's why I was talking with him, because I'm interested also in the history of the Muslims in China, and I wanted to write a book about it. So we met about this, and he actually very thankfully gave me some books on that he had, and I was very thankful to have those books. But anyway, he said, so he was invited by my mom-in-law's youngest brother's wife, okay, who lives in, he was originally living in Turkey, but now lives in Malaysia. So anyway, so she invited him to go to Turkey for a conference where they were discussing Islam, and he would present about Muslims in China. So his wife went along, like many of us do, and we go to a country for a conference. Hey, you come along, right? So she went along, and that was her problem, because she's a Uyghur and he wasn't. Okay, he was a Hui, she was a Uyghur. So when she went back, they came and questioned her, arrested her, took her to the concentration camp. So I asked her, what is it like there? So I'm not saying that every concentration camp is exactly the same. So I said, what I read is what they claim to be is that it's a re-education camp, that you are taking lessons in Chinese. She said, I graduated from Nanjing University and you want to teach me Chinese? I said, I mean, obviously that's not why they took me there. So in the morning I would attend these Chinese classes, which I already know, and in the afternoon, there would be interrogation, until I was like totally like this. And I said, mostly just want to know why I went to Turkey. I said, eventually after 6 months, they found nothing and they released me. And I said, what were the conditions like? She says, it's worse than, because at first they took her to prison, then took her to this camp. And she said the camp conditions were worse than the prison conditions, actually. It pretty much was like a prison. So that's the only firsthand report I have. And I have read like everybody else, I've watched like everybody else, reports of torture, rape, and all that. I don't know. I cannot confirm or unconfirm because I have not personally met anyone. So I cannot tell you more than what I know. However, if you're interested in knowing a bit more, my daughter who is there has recently, she contributed to this, and it was only published a month ago. It's called Toward the Positive Psychology of Islam and Muslims, and it's edited by Sister Dr. Noshin Pasha Zaidi from the University of Houston in Texas, okay? And my daughter contributed, of course, she didn't put her full name. She doesn't want the Communist Party to come on top of her for this. And she contributed a chapter on the Uyghurs. And so, but the concentration of the topic was, how do they cope with that kind of stress? Okay, so she has some more interesting things to say. So you can, if you want, purchase that book and read what she wrote about it.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to drop that into the chat if anybody wants to get a hold of that book, inshallah. But Stan Nitsky in the audience has been patiently waiting with the question. Go ahead, Stan.
Okay, I'm okay. I'm the Jewish guy from New York.
Hi.
A couple of things. You say that the Uyghurs, but the Uyghurs are Muslim, are they not?
Yes.
So you can say it's an ethnic prejudice in China, but it is in a sense a religious prejudice.
It is, but like I'm saying, the communist Chinese don't understand religion. So they only identify us. So for example, when people ask them, how many Muslims are in China? So they add up the Uyghurs, plus the Uyghurs, plus the Kazakhs, plus the Kyrgyz, and they give you this number of 25 million. Right?
Well, I know that when I was in China in the early 2000s, and I got out of the plane, I was walking with my son. My son was studying over, he's a professor of anthropology and Chinese studies. Mm-hmm. And we would have people walk up to us with little notes. Are you Christian? Mm-hmm. Because they were secretly, inviting us to go to a church service. But so religion in general at that point was not overly popular. So, you're dealing with, you can define it any way you want, but the reality is that it's anti-Muslim.
Yeah, there's a reawakening definitely of religion after 1980, when everything became more open. So many people became more aware of religions. But when earlier I was asked about the general population, most of them don't know much about religion. And it's not just in China, in Taiwan it's the same,
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else? I can't see the entire audience. Let me see if I can fix that. Is there anybody else who has a question for Dr. Fawzia? I had one, and I was wondering if it's okay if you don't know the answer to this, but maybe you've gleaned it from interactions with your daughter. Is any of this history, the extensive history that you summarized so succinctly for us, of Islam in China, is that taught in the curriculum, or is that not allowed by the Communist government of China?
It's not taught anywhere.
That's really,
in a way, the Chinese culture does not put a stress on religion. Even in Taiwan, for example, people take religion very lightly. They would say, oh, I'm a this, I'm a that, or I'm a nothing, nothing particular. Just like you would say, oh, you have a red shirt, I have a blue shirt, and you have a yellow shirt and white shirt, people don't fight over religion. It's just not that important to most people.
Mhm. So it's really just, like you said, the ethnicity. That's
So
interesting.
they would recognize you by ethnicity.
Yeah. So if Muslims wanted to go, who are very visibly Muslim, wanted to go into China, would they have to get whispered questions at customs like you did? Would it be safe for them to go? What would you recommend?
They don't ask about religion at all. When they look at me, they ask me if I'm Uyghur, meaning my ethnicity. When I told them no, are you Tibetan then? I said no.
No. Yeah, you know better now. Okay,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for answering all of those questions. There is another question in the audience about when this recording will be available, and I don't know the answer to that, but I think it will be shortly because our backstage is pretty remarkable and, is able to push things out very, very quickly. YouTube and Facebook later this week is when they will be available. I assume on the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona Facebook page and their YouTube channel. So please take a look at that. And in the chat, thank you so much, Dr. Fawzia. She's put in Toward a Positive Psychology of Islam and Muslims, edited by Nashin Pasha Zaidi, is the textbook, if anybody is interested in that. I strongly urge everybody to go ahead and share this when the video comes out later this week. The Islamic Speakers Bureau is 100% run by donations and is able to bring programs like this and, some of my favorite ones that, I think we'll talk about and advertise later on our Facebook page, but we're able to do that only through private donations. And we would really, really appreciate anything that you can donate. I believe donations are available. There might be a donate button on our Facebook page. There certainly is on our website. Very easy. Anything that you give and anything that you can encourage other people to give is highly appreciated. The website address is in the chat, isb-az.org/donate. So super easy. Again, if you just go to isb/az.org, the donate button is right there on the website, and it helps us bring more programming like this. And hopefully, inshallah, God willing, we're able to do this in person soon if everybody wears their masks and gets their vaccinations. That's my only request. And that does not represent ISBA's views. Those views are entirely my own. But please do help us out. And we look forward to seeing you in future programs. Thank you so much, Dr. Tung. This was incredible. I have been waiting a long time to hear this because I think the last time you gave it, I missed it. And I was very, very sad because I actually did not know that even that small number of 25 million, which I believe is what we teach in our Islam 101 courses with the Islamic Speakers Bureau, I wasn't even aware that China had that many Muslims there. And it bowled me over. And then subsequently the Uyghur situation arose. And now we've been, finding out more about Islam in China. And so your presentation today was very, very helpful. And I can't wait to go home and teach it to go upstairs and teach it to my kids. Did you have another question, Ahmed? I saw your hand raised briefly. No. Okay. Well, with that, I think we will let you guys get back to your families and your evening. Thank you so much, everybody. Salam, shalom, and peace.